So the readings today speak to us about seek good and not evil that you may live. Hate evil, love good. Let justice prevail at the gate. It's important for us to seek the good, to really discern that. Because if we don't, then we become, in a sense, like these herd of swine. We get filled with the wrong spirit that ultimately leads us off a cliff. And in many ways, what we're seeing in some of the sort of spirit of this age is one that isn't properly discerning, isn't properly stopping and praying. And I think social media kind of lends to this difficulty of thinking critically and taking time to think through a situation. There becomes a reputation assassination that happens. And what we need to do is we need to recognize where's the legitimate concern, but where is it going awry? Where is it becoming like the herd of swine going off a cliff? So in one sense, a legitimate concern could be looking at certain statues and taking time to discern, what does this statue mean? What is the whole history of this person? Is the statue merely here to facilitate the lost cause of the Confederacy? Is it something that an African American, as they go through the streets of Richmond, can look at, and there's something that happens within them that is a horrifying feeling? It's important to legitimately take time, think about that, discern, but in an orderly fashion, determine what the country should do. A mob rule in which there's just this pressure without thinking is a very dangerous thing. Because what happens is there isn't discernment throughout all these different situations. There might be some, such as General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, maybe he shouldn't have a statue up. But then it goes all the way around, even to some of these Catholic saints, who, if anything, are the very opposite of the whole idea of taking statues down. Both St. Louis and St. Junipero Serra were men who lived this gospel of mercy. So Junipero Serra, he was born in Spain, and he left everything. I think he had a career, I forget if he was a lawyer or something like that, but he became a Franciscan, and then he left everything because he loved the people of the New World. Sometimes we think about the colonization of the Americas in terms of a black legend. Now there's a white legend, and the white legend says everybody coming was perfectly angelic and did everything perfect. We know that that's not the case. There was a lot of mixed situations and political motives in the state and things like that. But the black legend, which is maybe what we're dealing with right now, is the sense that everything that Europe brought, including and most especially Christianity, was wrong in and of itself. And every single motive, every single thing was bad. And that's this kind of experience that has been infiltrating South America and Central America. We see the famous Cesar Chavez basically saying Christianity is the reason for all the problems in South America. And it's this idea again of sort of putting on the church this sort of blending of what very oppressive secular governments were imposing on the indigenous peoples. And these were groups that were very much not following the church. These are what we call absolutist monarchs. And they were the ones that sort of saw the church as a department of their power to be utilized for their good. And many of, including the true revolution of independence in Mexico by Hidalgo, where he cries out, "Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe," that was very different than the revolution later on of Benito Juarez, because in that time in Mexico, there was the church standing up for the indigenous peoples, for the native people, saying, state, you cannot hurt and take away the rights of these people who are children of God. And so the good revolution in that sense rose up to say, we are defending life. Later on, there was one that was more of, let us destroy the church. And this is where we get the 1920s Cristero battles. That happens with a different type of government that seeks to oppress the indigenous peoples and anyone that they support, including the church. So it's important for us to remember that in these colonization moments, that yes, at different times you may have had different missionaries not always using the right kind of strategies in order to help bring the gospel. But by and large, the missionaries that came over truly desired to understand the people, to treasure them, and to find ways to share the good news with them. And Junipero Serra is one of those that really did this in this beautiful way. Junipero Serra, he left everything out of a deep love to bring Jesus to the people that he never met. And when he got to Mexico, he dedicated himself to Our Lady of Guadalupe. He consecrated himself to Our Lady of Guadalupe for this mission of going up north and starting to found these different missions. And they're the missions of Sacramento, of San Francisco, of Los Angeles, of Carmel, of all these different ones. And as he did, he always would say, always keep moving forward, go forward, never look back. In the sense of just continuing, regardless of what's going on, to keep loving God and keep bringing people to the Lord. Now, some people in this particular time are saying that he's the cause of genocide, that he's the cause of so many deaths. Many of the deaths that happened within the missions were actually because of disease, very sadly. Some would say that he was also connected with the genocide attacking the Native Americans, but that happened when the governor of California, after Junipero Serra even was alive, many, many years after, said, we have to fight against the Native American peoples, and so we're going to bring the U.S. cavalry to exterminate them. So this is kind of a very sad chapter in our American history of a governor saying we're going to have the U.S. cavalry go on an extermination because of the threat that the Native American peoples pose. But that was not Junipero Serra. That was actually something decades afterwards. What did Junipero Serra do? When the military, this is again during the time of Mexico, so he wasn't there during the time of the United States part, but the military of Spain, of the Mexican colony of Spain, was oppressing the native people, was doing horrible offenses to them. So what did Junipero Serra do? He actually suffered from cancer of the leg, and I don't know what that's like, but I've heard that that's an extremely painful thing. He was willing to walk back from California to Mexico in order to go to the central government in Mexico to ask for a Bill of Rights for the people, the native peoples that were being oppressed by the military. He received that, and then he went back with his wounded leg. That's how much he loved the people. If you see him as an Adolf Hitler, as a person who wants to kill the native people, this doesn't make sense. He's someone who is willing to go through all of that suffering to gain a Bill of Rights even before the United States even had a constitution of the Bill of Rights. He actually came up with it first. And he's the one then that said, we are going to defend the lives and the dignity and the rights of every single one of these persons. And even those who, maybe because they had been oppressed, they savagely fought back, he defended them against the death penalty. When other people were saying, look what they did, they killed these people, we have to destroy them, we have to annihilate them, he said, no, No, they're still children of God. Yes, what they did was wrong, but we can't overcome evil with evil. We have to overcome evil with good. This is who Junipero Serra was. Now, some people, I just heard something recently about, well, there was corporal punishment, or there was something like that. And I have to research that. I don't know that story, but we have to be very careful when we're dealing with history, when we look through the lens of our particular time, and we judge the past, but then we say that we're perfect. There's something dangerous with that. Are we willing to look at all the religious sisters who sacrificed so much, who gave such great education, and maybe look back at them and say, they were using the rulers, they were using corporal punishment, they were using all these horrible things. Are we willing to sort of go back and say, they were barbarians, and we're the enlightened ones? Maybe there's a lot of educational practices right now that we're introducing. Even if we think about the whole backroom policy and some really scary things like that, history's going to judge us. And so we need to learn how to always look through the lens of a different culture. We have to recognize the things that are intrinsically wrong in and of themselves, but we can't just sort of put our lens back then. We have to have the eyes of how the Lord looks at us. Yes, he sees maybe the things that are messy there, but it's not a complete wiping away. He doesn't destroy the statue of us for any sort of maybe thing that could have been better. So we need a person like Junipero Serra. In the midst of so many different figures who are out there, yes, maybe some of them should not have a statue, but that should not be Junipero Serra. He's someone who is willing to sacrifice much to make sure that those that did not have a voice had a voice. We should be proud of this history, of our American history, of our Hispanic history, and of our Catholic history. And so I encourage you, learn about Junipero Serra. Read the letter that Archbishop Gomez wrote, which is quite beautiful, that talks about the truth about who this great saint was, and who this great activist in the true sense of the word, who defended the rights of the natives. And let us ask his prayers for our country, that we might learn how to seek the good and not evil, to be able to discern, to be able to say, how do I love the person in front of me? How do I sacrifice for the person in front of me? And not become one of the herd of swine that becomes possessed and then goes off the ledge.